Indiana Jones, I could have been your greatest adventure. Anything goes. Hello, my fellow YouTubers and subscribers, and welcome to my latest movie review, where today I continue with my re-reviews of Indiana Jones with the second film of the Indiana Jones franchise, Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom, which is technically a prequel because it's set in 1935, whereas the first film, Raiders of the Lost Ark, was set in 1936. The film was released in 1984, 3 years after the original, was directed by Steven Spielberg once again, stars Harrison Ford, Kate Capshaw and Huy Quan. It actually won an Oscar as well. In 1935, Indiana Jones is tasked by Indian villagers with reclaiming a rock stolen from them by a secret cult beneath the catacombs of an ancient palace. So, Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom. This one, I feel, gets the most mixed response of all the first four movies anyway. As for my opinion on this film, I've had a bit of an up and down relationship about it over the years. It was the first Indiana Jones film I saw. I've often changed my opinion on this one quite a bit over the years. Some people love it, some people hate it, some people are just kind of, eh. So it's, out of all the Indiana Jones films, it's probably the most Marmite one. You'll either love it or hate it. My verdict on this film, it is good. It is good. But, there's a but coming, it's not quite on the same level as Raiders. Look, I don't hate Temple of Doom. I actually enjoyed this movie. It was pretty decent. It was a fun, entertaining romp with a decent enough story and a fun plot that kept me entertained for 2 hours. The bad news is, it's not great. The reason why I say that is because definitely towards the second half of this movie, it goes very dark. Yeah, there's a plot revolving child slavery in an underground temple, and there's even a scene where a guy's heart gets ripped out. And you see it. It's pretty gory, and it's a little graphic at times. There's a bit more blood in this one, and it is probably, arguably, a bit more violent than Raiders was. I'm all for them doing something different, and I appreciate Spielberg wanted to do a completely different story to what he had with Raiders. For me, this movie, it went a little bit too dark, and at times it was kind of uncomfortable to watch, especially with child slaves being whipped all the time. That was a bit harrowing, I must admit. I feel like the film gets a little bit too intense at times. And this was the movie that kind of prompted the 12 rating, the PG-13 rating, whatever you want to call it. It was controversial for that reason. In a way, you kind of have to thank Temple of Doom for that, because without this film, maybe we wouldn't have had such age restrictions for the future. That being said, the action of this movie is a ton of fun. It is great to watch the action again. Harrison Ford kicks ass as the character, and he really is enjoying himself as Indiana Jones. He clearly is, and he loves it. And he's throwing himself into all the stunts, and he's even putting on more of the schmoozing like he did in the first movie. His romantic interlude with Willie Scott is entertaining to watch, and it's definitely a different chemistry than with Marion in the first film. Speaking of Willie Scott, though, oh god, Willie Scott is a terrible character. I'm sorry, I do not like Willie Scott whatsoever. I really wish Marion was in this film. Willie Scott is just this nightclub singer, spoiled brat. There's no reason to be there, other than she's just kind of tagging along for the ride. There's no purpose in the script for her character to be there. She's there to be the eye candy of the film, and let's face it, you know, she does that job pretty well. Temple of Doom is one of the strangest openings to a film I've ever seen. When we're inside the nightclub in Shanghai, and she sings a Chinese version of Anything Goes. For a film that's so dark, it's a little bizarre to start the film that way. And also, when the title appears, it's behind her. Surely it would have been better to put the title in front of her, but whatever. And unfortunately, the writing of Willie Scott is just very bad, because she's just this generic damsel in distress. She really isn't that great of a character. There's no change in the character. There's no empowering moment where she stands up and finally takes courage. There's none of that. A very weak character, and definitely, you know, deflates the film for me on a number of levels. However, I do like Short Round. I think Short Round is pretty good in this film. Huy Quan is a good little actor, and he's quite charming, he's quite charismatic. He definitely tries to mirror Indy in a lot of aspects. He definitely sort of looks up to Indy as a bit of a dad in some respects. And he gets involved in a lot of action as well. And he's pretty courageous, he's pretty brave. And I like his spunk, how he gradually comes into his own towards the end of the film, and he ends up saving Indy from the Maharaja when he's like stabbing the dole of Indy. You know, that's a really good sequence to watch. The location is really good, like going to India and Pankot, you know, that's awesome. And the underground temple, the set is very impressive. Like, they've spent the money on this production, and it does look pretty spectacular. It moves at a good enough pace for 2 hours, and you will be entertained. It's just a film without a lot of depth, and it doesn't have the kind of classic big moments that Raiders had. The minecart chase would probably be the most impressive action sequence for me, but it never feels quite on the same scale as Raiders did with the truck chase. There's no big Indiana Jones moments like that. The finale is action-packed, and it is very entertaining, and most of the action is awesome. But we don't really get to learn much about the villains. The villains are a bit crap, to be honest. Mola Ram is a terrible villain. Unfortunately, he is, for me, arguably one of the weakest villains in the series. He comes into the film far too late, literally 1 hour in. Halfway through is when we first see him. He doesn't really do anything. I mean, sure, there's a cool sequence on a bridge. Yeah, fine, I can dig that, but I just felt like there should have been more to his character, and there should have been more to this kind of thuggy cult. Like, it's kind of briefly explained what they are at the beginning during the dinner sequence, but aside from that, they're really not that interesting, and I couldn't help but kind of zone out a bit when Mola Ram and his thuggy guys are on screen. And like I said about the movie being a bit too dark and a bit too graphic, the dinner scene as well was there purely just for gross out. The dinner scene was purely there as a gross out sequence for us to go, ugh. So I kind of feel like Spielberg kind of lost his way with this film. He kind of focused too much on the kind of scare factor, the kind of shock factor of what he was going for, rather than, you know, creating a fun adventure. I'm just not as interested in seeing Indy possessed by the thuggy cult as him kicking ass, quite frankly. This adventure should have been toned a lot differently. Don't get me wrong, there's comedy in the movie, and I did laugh a few times, especially in the jungle sequence. That is quite funny. But again, the film suffers from a major tonal distraction. The fact that it's so dark and it's so intense, it really is almost not joyless to watch, but almost harrowing to watch, like I said, with child slavery. So you really have to sort of pick your moments with this film. Score by John Williams is fantastic as usual, and it definitely adds to the film. It definitely elevates it so much more. Spielberg's direction is good, but clearly he's kind of trying to be very experimental with this one, trying to go for something a little bit more out there than Raiders, but it doesn't quite work. I have no issue with the plot. The plot's fine, you know, it is what it is. It's an Indiana Jones movie. They're going after this MacGuffin, and they need to bring it back to the villagers, and then they also have to free the slaves. You know, that's fine. You know, you can follow that. It's easy enough to follow. But it's the execution of said plot which is slightly weird, again, with the thuggy cult and the darkness and everything. Mola Ram's demise is also kind of underwhelming. It's just a lousy fight on the bridge, which is, I mean, it's nice to look at, but you don't feel any impact from it because you don't have any development of this character. I still couldn't tell you what his motivations were. But nevertheless, Temple of Doom is a fun prequel to the first movie, and it is enjoyable to watch. There's some fantastic action sequences, but it's not perfect, and it definitely has a lot of problems for me. So I will give Temple of Doom So, next time on Indiana Jones movie review, we move on to The Last Crusade. And don't be confused by that title, because it isn't actually the last film of the series. There's still 2 more after this. But what do you think of Temple of Doom? Please comment down below, let me know, and please hit the like and subscribe button for more content, and stay tuned for my review of Last Crusade. So until then, I'm Pajak's Perspective. See ya. Bye for now.